know, your ass better call somebody.
Welcome everyone to our new sports show, Joel and the Genius. I am Joel, this is the Genius, Mike Hall. We will share with you some facts, insights, and opinions about anything and all that is sports going on throughout the seasons. Each week we'll start with our top 5, follow up with a little something called Old School, New School, and then get some local sports insights from coaches and personalities in our Coach's Corner segment. Finally, we'll close it out what we like to call the finisher. Our own little take on something that's been on our minds between each show. And without further ado, let's start our show.
Since many of our fans are fantasy football players, and we are in the heart of fantasy football draft season, we decided to start the show with the 5 biggest mistakes people make when drafting their fantasy football teams.
Here we go. Number 1 on the board, don't draft positions too high.
Kickers. Never take a kicker before the last round. I say this year after year. Other fantasy hosts say this year after year. Yet people every year take kickers in rounds 9, 10, 11. This is way too early for a kicker. First of all, the position itself is way too volatile, and there's too many sleepers in those late rounds. Another position not to take too early is defense. Again, the volatility of the position, it's too volatile to take a defense too early. The last 3 rounds is where your defense should be drafted. Then you have year-by-year stuff. This year, it's quarterbacks and tight ends. The quarterback and tight end position, it's top-heavy. You've got 4 guys, 3, 4, 5 guys at the very top that are going to put up rock-solid numbers week after week. After that, you have guys that are going to be up and down all season, guys that you want to play the matchups with. So if you're not going to get an Aaron Rodgers or a Rob Gronkowski in the late 3rd, early 4th round, wait till rounds 9, 10, 11. You will get yourself a top 10 quarterback or a top 10 tight end in those rounds.
What about if someone in your league decides to pull some sort of shenanigans and pick a player at a random time earlier in the draft than you'd expected?
I love when guys jump for players because that just means they're leaving better players on the board. Draft for value.
Which brings us to number 2 on the board, draft for best value. Let me know a little bit more about best value and what changes as the draft changes.
Well, what we mean, draft by best value, don't be a homer, don't be a guy who, even if it's not your team, say, obviously I'm a Raider fan. Hey, the Eagles had a hell of a year last year. Maybe I want to draft a whole bunch of Eagles. You don't want to do this. Carson Wentz has a bad game. All his receivers have a bad game. Now you've got no points at your quarterback, no points at your tight end, no points at your wide receiver. Another issue with drafting too many players from one team are bye weeks. Now you've got all your players, all your top positions in a bye week on the same week. And if you have bench players from that same team, well, now your bench players can't fill in because they're on a bye too. Avoid drafting too many players from one team. Draft for best value who's out there. You can't put people in order. You can't say, oh, I'm definitely going running back round 1. You got 5 running backs off the board. If you have the 6th pick and Antonio Brown is still out there, you can't force a running back. Take the best value. Take Antonio Brown.
Now you mentioned bye weeks, and part of that, what can hurt you about bye weeks?
Don't overthink bye weeks.
Number 3 on the board.
When you're doing your draft, there are ways around the bye week. You don't want to put too much out. Bye weeks, first of all, don't start until weeks 4, 5. Most people they don't really affect you until 6 or 7. It's later in the season. By the time bye weeks start to come around, half of your bench isn't going to be your bench anymore. By week 4 or 5, you see which sleepers are still sleeping. You know which guys just aren't cutting it, and you can make the proper moves at that time. Don't worry too much about the bye week during the draft.
Number 4 on our board is an interesting point, playing the matchup game. So now we're working on bye weeks and different players' of talents. How does that change your draft perspective?
What I mean by don't play the matchup game is, like, I personally, as I talked about earlier with the tight ends, if I don't get a Rob Gronkowski or a Travis Kelce, I'm going to play matchups throughout the season with my tight end. I'm gonna have 2, maybe even 3 tight ends on my roster, depending on what kind of depth I have, and I'm gonna play the guy that seems to have the best matchup each week. The problem with trying to draft that way is the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season, everything is fresh, everything is new. You don't know who the teams that were weak against the quarterback last year. They may have strong defenses this year. The Saints were god-awful for 2 seasons. Last year, they were a great defense. You can't just automatically assume a team's going to be bad again this year.
Which brings us to our last and most interesting point, is where people are trying to compare things, chasing last season's stats. How can that really hurt people in their draft?
It's the same year to year as it is week to week. Just because a guy had a huge game last week doesn't mean he's going to have a huge game this week. Just because a guy had a solid season last year, a good 4 or 5 game stretch at the end of last year, doesn't necessarily mean he's going to do it again this year. You have to look at the situation. Is he still the starting running back or starting wide receiver or whatever? Did the team bring somebody in the offseason that's going to be ahead of them on the depth chart? Are they going to see as many targets as they saw last year? Things change year to year. You have to look at this year's projections, not last year's numbers.
And there you have it, folks. That's our top 5 on the draft board. Don't draft your positions too high. Draft for best value. Don't overthink your bye weeks. Playing the matchup game. And finally, don't chase last season's stats. Everything changes each year. It's a new season. You have to really think and look at things with a better perspective. Coming up next is our next segment, Old School and New School. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. It's about that time where we compare a few things we've noticed in the change of the games that we love so much. This week, we're talking about hoops and how the games have changed over the years. Our old school, new school topics. The inside game versus the 3-ball. So many teams have changed from the post-up game to the 3-point shot. The Warriors, the Cavaliers, the Clippers, everybody shooting the ball from the outside. Mike, what do you prefer about the old school game as opposed to the new school game?
Fundamentals. I missed the fundamentals of the game. I just saw an interview. Dwight Howard is talking about working on his jump shot, like his 3-point shot. Dwight Howard.
He was never an outside player.
Dwight Howard can't shoot a free throw, and the man's talking about shooting 3-pointers now because that's how the game has changed. They won't even go to the big man in the post anymore. Joel Embiid, 7 feet tall. He takes more threes than I just don't get it. What happened to the post-up game? What happened to the Tim Duncans? Why can't we have a guy? I mean, they called him Mr. Fundamental.
Yes, they
did. He played 20 years.
20 years, averaging a double-double for most of his career, 20 and 10 every game, and still one of the best teams in basketball. And then that brings me to another point, is the movement of teams, moving the basketball, offenses, defenses, and how these different offenses are playing. I think that as teams move the ball better, they tend to get more scoring, but it's not as much scoring. Where does that change with the defense and offense?
Well, teams are moving the ball well, but it's still, these days, it's only to shoot a 3 or to get a slam dunk. Where's the jump shot? What happened to the 18-foot jump shot? What happened to the elbow? Just even the high-low game now. It's not like you're worried about that guy shooting the ball from the elbow. I don't get it. Even it's either isolation like the Rockets, and one guy's going to touch the ball, or even, again, the teams, like you said, the Warriors, they move the ball so well. But the bottom line is the ball's going up from behind the arc.
Absolutely.
Somebody is putting that ball up from behind the arc. What happened to the post game?
The post game has changed, and then now we talk about how we're looking at teams that are molded with superstars, all right, as opposed to the old school version of teams that were running offenses, running inside plays, running outside plays. Where do you feel you like the old school, the superstar teams, or the old school, or the new school, the new school superstar teams, the old school of building teams to win?
Well, you know, putting multiple superstars together, even the old school teams, none of those teams were, I shouldn't say none. There was a Detroit Pistons team way back then, that won with, that was a team. They didn't have any real superstars. They did it as a team. The Chauncey Billups.
Thomas, Joe Duke. Oh, you're talking.
I'm talking the. I'm talking the 2000. I'm talking the Chauncey Billups.
Okay.
The Ben
Hamilton.
Davis, Rip Hamilton. Rasheed Wallace. Those guys did it as a team. But even you want to go back and talk about Jordan and the Bulls. Pippen was one of the top 25 greatest players of all time, and they always had a third guy, whether it be
always role players
Dennis
in
Rodman.
those teams.
He may not have been the scorer, but the guy grabbed 20 rebounds a game.
And that made a difference in getting the ball out to the players who were going to be scoring the basketball.
Before Rodman, they had Horace Grant doing the same thing. He may not have gotten all the props or the credit, but Horace Grant was a beast. And so even the teams back then that did it, they did it with superstars. The difference now is that guys are leaving their team to do it. Jordan, Pippen, they were same team their whole time. These days, guys are changing teams more, and that's upsetting fans. But there's no loyalty from the team. If a player starts to dip off, they get rid of him in a second. They'll trade him, they'll cut him, whatever. So I don't understand why everybody's so upset that players don't have loyalty. There's no loyalty. It's about money. If you work for a company and another company that does the same thing is offering you more money, you're going to take it.
It's about the money and it's about the chip in the end and how they're going to get to that point and how they can finish.
That's it.
Brings us a very interesting point about talking about fundamentals and how players play the game, which will bring me into our Coach's Corner next segment. Please stay tuned. I'm going to have my guest to talk about how the game has changed and how he coaches the game, and we bring it back to a little bit lower level of our talk today. Welcome back, everybody. I'd like to welcome our first guest to the Coach's Corner. He's been coaching an area for the past 15 years, local programs throughout Westchester County with great results. An 8th grade Catholic championship. His goal, which ultimately stands out from the rest, is his love of the fundamentals. His main goal is to teach the kids the base skills that will make them into better basketball players and play as a team till the last second on his clock. You can tell by his passion alone why his programs produce results. I've had the pleasure of coaching with him, and now you'll have the pleasure of sharing of some of his love of the game of basketball. Please welcome Marty Durkin. Marty, thanks for being here. Yeah, thanks a lot. So, Marty, tell me, what is it about the fundamentals that really brings it out in your program that really makes the kids really enjoy what's going on in your basketball clinics and such?
I think when we go to fundamentals, we do a lot of dribbling, we do a lot of passing, we do a lot of shooting. So the ball is always in their hand. They always have something to do. I really stress games, like game situations. So we put them in a shooting game, like first team up to 10. They don't have to do hop-ups or push-ups or something like that. And I think that really brings out the practice. But the other main fundamental thing I do without the ball is our defense. And although everyone in the county thinks it's a zone defense, we play man. I don't do anything but man because I think man should be taught to the kids at the lower level, and then they can, wherever the high school coaches go, they'll have that man base, and then they can do whatever they want, and it's easy from man to a zone or wherever they're going to put them.
Now, in our last segment, we talked about old school and new school, and you're a bit of an old school guy. What's the best idea that you instill in your players when in your coaching programs?
You say I'm old looking? No, definitely an old school guy. Can't stand the one-on-one. I can't stand the ball in the hand for more than 4 or 5 dribbles. If you're not going to do anything with 4 or 5 dribbles, get it out of your hand and get it to someone else, pass and cut. Like, everyone's loving that LeBron James is sitting out there for 15 seconds with the ball and then eating up the clock, and then he takes the guy one-on-one. He's going to score, he's going to miss the shot, or he's going to turn it over. And that's 15 seconds, 20 seconds you're not getting back, and everyone else is watching. I don't like that, especially at the lower levels. You want the kids getting involved. You want them playing. You want them setting screens. That's my take on that.
Now, coaching at the lower levels, you have a lot of parents evaluating programs and looking at programs in different aspects. What is something that you're going to tell a parent who is looking to get into one of your programs, or where they should send their kids to programs?
What I preach is my practices. Like, 26 years that I've been doing this, I've been hired out to do practices, coach practices, be at practices. And that's when I said, why don't I just do something myself? So my practice is what you're paying for. You're not paying for time on the basketball court. You're paying for my practices, because what's in those practices, all the fundamentals. Everything, every time we do it. I'm not running plays for 45 minutes. I'm in a teaching the dribble. I'm teaching the shooting, because I love shooting, because that's where I grew up shooting. Grew up teaching. So that you're definitely going to get, and you're going to get a defense, and you're going to practice hard.
Now, in the game you talked about LeBron doing the one thing. In a one-on-one situation, how do you coach players and work with players?
That's tough. This level is really tough, because you got a lot of mental stuff going on with those kids, so it's hard to coach them. But I'm fortunate enough with the two teams that I coach at Phenom, and Phenom is our program. The parents get what I'm trying to do, so they let me have a little ring. And if there's a problem, I'll talk to the parents, and we have a good communication. I think that's the way it should be. Like the high school level, it's hard, because everything gets involved. The superintendent's involved, the AD's involved, the parent's not happy, parent is, whatever.
Talk about some of the problems. What are some of the things that you see that are most prevalent in these types of programs where you feel that your coaching helps to change that as you go along? You did mention some of it, but tell me some more about the things.
I don't want to. Listen, I don't know about
you can be very vague on this
different
subject.
Programs have different things. It's more how you teach the kid. And I'm fortunate enough to have 12 good kids on my fourth going into fifth grade team. My third grade team is just as good. It's all about, you're going to coach. I tell them what they do wrong, but you can't be negative. You have to throw a positive thing in there once in a while, and you should end with a positive. It shouldn't be like, hey, you're dribbling the ball this way, that way. And say, hey, that's a great crossover. That's a great through the legs. That's a great pullback,
Do you think that some programs are missing that these days, and that's why you've really stressed on the fundamentals?
I really don't know about most programs, because I'm kind of trying to build this program up, and I have great coaches that are behind me. I have Kevin Miller, I have Spencer Ingram, and then I have the Phenom staff behind me. So it's working where I am, and it's good. It's fun.
All right, Marty, thank you very much. It's been great. So that's it, everybody. We're going to come back with the final segment for the finisher. Mike is going to be coming back with our close for the show. And Marty, thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Once again, we appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge about basketball.
Thanks for having me. It was great to be in here.
Thank you. We'll be back with the final segment, the finisher, with Mike, and he's going to tell you about what's been bothering him for the past couple weeks. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. We're going to finish the show today the way we started it, talking about fantasy football. The biggest mistake you can make when it comes to your fantasy football draft is drafting your team too soon. Look, I get it. It's exciting. The fantasy football draft, fantasy football itself is just my favorite time of the year, and the draft is my favorite day. I'm in multiple leagues, but I've got my league of record. And the day that league is going to draft, the night before, it's Christmas Eve. I can't wait. It's so exciting. But if you're drafting your league before the final weekend of the preseason, you're just drafting your league way too soon. If you're the commissioner of your league and you're in charge of when your league drafts and you're drafting prior to Labor Day weekend, you're doing your league a disservice. If you're a player and you're joining just a Yahoo or a NFL.com or a ESPN league, and you're doing it prior to the final weekend of the preseason, you're drafting too soon. There are too many injuries. Football is too violent of a sport. Too much can happen. Enough happens during the game. Enough can happen in practice. But you're taking your chances with preseason games? You're doing yourself a disservice. Wait for your draft.
Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Joel. He's the Genius. We hope you enjoyed our show. Like, follow, subscribe. Big shout out to the folks at LMCTV for helping us put this together. We'll be back in the coming weeks with more interesting information about the games that we love so much. We'll see you soon. Peace.